Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're having a wonderful and inspiring week so far and that you've had time to work on your artwork or whatever it is that lights you up inside and makes you feel most like yourself, whatever that may be. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing the 5 things I do to prepare before starting a larger painting or a collection of larger paintings. And while I do this, I'm going to be sharing a time lapse of one of the oil paintings that I created for my first Etsy exclusive collection that I'll be launching in the beginning of 2019. This collection will have pieces that will be available for international purchase, and it is composed of 10 different still lifes created with both oils and watercolors. With this collection, I really wanted to transmit the beauty in the common objects that surround us that we often take for granted. And I also wanted to transmit the importance of staying mindful, present, and positive in our day-to-day lives. For those of you who don't know, I very recently opened up my shop on Etsy, through which I'll be selling my original oil and watercolor paintings. And I will be working much more on it in the upcoming year. I'll be leaving a link to my Etsy shop down below in the description box in case you want to go and check it out. And if you're interested in knowing the exact dates that this collection will be launched, I highly recommend becoming an email subscriber of mine, because my insider group receives news directly from me about what I'm up to and the latest products and services that I'm putting out there. Okay, so before getting into my 5 steps to prepare for a painting, I just want to say hello and welcome to all you new people just visiting my channel for the very first time. I'm super happy you guys are here and I appreciate you watching this video. I would absolutely love for you guys to subscribe to my channel and become part of this growing art community. I publish a brand new video every single week sharing art tips, drawing and painting tutorials, and encouragement for aspiring artists. And if you subscribe, do not forget to click on the little notification bell, because otherwise YouTube is not going to let you know when my new videos are out. Okay, so just as a sort of note before getting into these steps, I just want to say that I don't go through every single one of these steps for every single painting that I create. In my opinion, it's important to keep a balance between faster studies, sketches, and explorations, and the creation of larger, more polished pieces. What finalized pieces and exploratory type sketches and studies look like is definitely going to vary a lot from artist to artist, depending on the artist's particular subject, medium, and techniques of choice. But just as an example, for me, I could be working on this still life oil painting collection, and at the same time, I could be taking breaks with improving my figure drawing through timed sketches in my sketchbook. So I'm kind of always working on faster studies or explorations that require little to no preparations, because I consider them incredibly important, and at the same time working on larger projects. Okay, so after having said all that, I am now going to get into the 5 steps that I always go through in preparation for a larger project or a piece that I'm intending to sell. Step number 1 is going to be to decide what subject I'm going to be painting. Is it going to be a landscape, a portrait, an animal, a still life? Now, this is obviously going to depend on whether I'm creating a commission for somebody that is asking me to do a particular thing, or if I am doing the project for myself. And if the project is for myself, I often decide on a subject depending on what I want to improve on, and other times I'm inspired to paint a specific subject because maybe I've been off on a trip and something really inspired me, like landscapes or something like that, or maybe I just feel compelled to do it. So in the case of this particular painting that you're watching me work on, this is part of a series, and with this series, I really was looking to challenge myself in a variety of ways. Completing a series of paintings is a huge challenge in and of itself, because it requires a lot more commitment on part of the artist than just completing one piece. In the past, I've been able to grow a lot from producing and completing series of paintings. And this is something that I highly recommend beginner artists do, because I feel that through the development of a series, you're able to get to know yourself as an artist a lot. You're able to figure out the techniques that come naturally to you, what you have to work more on, etc. A bunch of things that you're not able to discover through a standalone painting. But this is a topic for a different day. For this series, I decided to go with still lifes because I really wanted to explore and practice creating different visually pleasing compositions using one same group of objects, which in this case were a few different types of flowers, a couple of apples, a glass vase, and a wooden basket. Before going out to actually buy these items, I already knew that I wanted to include a few different flowers in my still life, and I also wanted to include a couple of pieces of fruit. I also knew that I wanted to use greens because I love green. And I also had texture in mind because I know that having a good combination of different textures makes for an interesting looking composition. It's always important to have these things in mind: color, textures, sizes, shapes, etc. when you're making your collection of objects, because all of these different things are going to allow you to create an interesting and harmonious looking composition, which is what you want. Step number 2 for me is to set up my photo session. And I talk a lot more about this in a very old YouTube video of mine in which I actually take you into my studio and let you into my photo taking process. I'm going to make sure to leave a link to that video down below in the description box. If I'm creating a painting of a subject that I don't have immediate access to in order to be able to photograph, like let's say I want to create a series of landscapes and I don't have access to that particular place, then sometimes I look for photographs online, but it's incredibly important to always use photographs that you have permission to use. When I go down this route, I make sure to use photos from resources such as pixabay.com, unsplash.com, etc. These websites provide excellent quality photographs that you are free to use. And there are other cases in which my art reference is actually a collage that I've created. So in these cases, I collect a variety of images that can be either my own or that I find through these awesome websites that I just mentioned, or that combine both. And I do this digitally through Photoshop. However it is that you decide to create that initial reference image for yourself that you're going to use for a painting, it's incredibly important that you have overall composition in mind. I'm not going to be getting into composition very much today because that is a complete topic in and of itself. Do let me know in the comment section if you'd like me to create a video on some pointers that will help you achieve harmonious and visually pleasing compositions, and I'll totally make that happen. But a few things that I always have in mind when I am taking pictures for paintings are things like lights and shadows, making sure that I have one element that is a focal point of my composition, that I am not overcrowding my composition with too many different elements. I always have color in mind because color is absolutely essential in order to be able to create a composition that is harmonious and cohesive looking. For the most part, I try to keep a limited color palette and I make sure to stick to the same colors throughout the painting, and in this case, in the entire series. And also, as I mentioned before, I try to pick objects that have different textures so that I can create a variety and interest in this way. And finally, I always try to create some sort of asymmetrical balance in my piece. This particular piece that you're watching me paint was a little bit difficult because it's a double panel painting and I wanted to stay away from painting the vase of flowers right in the center. So what I did for this painting, and I don't know if you can tell, but when I was laying down my initial preliminary sketch, I made sure that my vase wasn't cut down straight in the middle. I left more of the vase visible on the right panel than on the left. This was an intentional choice, and I never like leaving elements, either right smack down the vertical or right smack down the horizontal line of any of my paintings. The reason this is because usually when something is placed right smack in the middle of a painting, it's not very interesting. And even though this vase isn't right in the middle of the piece, I end up creating a balance by playing around with the elements outside of the vase. If you don't know about the rule of thirds in photography, I highly recommend you read about it and learn about the 9-piece grid, because it helps you understand and start visualizing compositions in thirds instead of in halves, which is really going to lead to much interesting results. Okay, moving on to number 3. For me, this means deciding on the format of my piece, so whether it's going to be vertical or horizontal or squared, and also what type of substrate I'm going to be painting on. In my case, most of the time, it's either paper if I'm painting with watercolors, or if I'm creating an oil or an acrylic painting, I paint either on canvas boards or stretched canvas, but this can also be wood or whatever you like to work on. So what I do is I open up my images in Photoshop, which if you do not have any photo editing software at all and you do not want to pay for Photoshop, there is no problem. There is a free downloadable software that is called GIMP that you can get for free for either Mac or PC. I really feel that having a photo editing software like Photoshop or even GIMP is really helpful for artists, because it allows us to crop photos to what fits best depending on the composition on hand. It allows you to even cut certain parts and modify your image. It allows you to modify colors, to zoom in, zoom out as you're painting. And I personally like working from my computer screen as opposed to actually printing out my photographic reference. GIMP is a great option for artists out there who do not want to pay for Photoshop, and this downloadable software includes all of the main Photoshop tools that you could need to do all of these things. I'm going to make sure to leave a link to them down below in the description box, and I am not affiliated with them in any way at all. Once I've had a chance to look over all of my different images on my computer, then I weed out or throw away the ones that I don't like, and I keep all of the ones that I'm going to be using for present or future paintings on a brand new folder on my desktop, and I select the one that I'm going to be using next. I then decide whether my piece is going to have a vertical or a horizontal format. Once I have my image that I'm going to be working with in front of me on my computer screen, I am going to decide whether a vertical, horizontal, or square format fits it best. And this is going to depend greatly on the subject that I am painting. Usually, for example, when I am painting landscapes, I go straight for a horizontal format, or at least a format that is a bit wider than it is tall. But when it comes to still life, it really is going to vary depending on the type of composition that you want to create. Something that I find really helpful at this point is to get my sketchbook out and draw a few different thumbnails, kind of brainstorming different ways that I can crop my picture, or maybe zoom into a certain area and leave out the rest. All of these things really help you come up with a more interesting looking composition. You don't really have to stay with the image the way that it is. So at this point, I start considering the different sizes of canvas or canvas boards that I have on hand, or that I know that I can very easily get at the art supply store. And what is important now is to accommodate that same image into the same proportion of the canvas board or whatever it is that you're going to be using. It's very important to have your reference picture in the exact same proportion as the substrate that you're going to be painting on. So in other words, if I know that I'm going to be working on a 50 by 40 centimeter canvas, I make sure to change my Photoshop file so that the reference image that I'm constantly viewing when I am painting is the same proportion of my painting. Or in other words, I'm viewing the same thing at scale. And this comes in especially handy when you're creating that preliminary sketch before starting a painting, because it allows you to more easily draw or sketch in the different elements in their appropriate places within the space. And it also helps you achieve correct proportions and all of those different things, which should be spot on before actually starting to paint. My fourth step when I am preparing or planning to start a painting is I plan my color scheme, and I also prepare my different paint colors that I'm going to be using. It's extremely important to plan your colors and limit your colors as well. You don't want to be reaching out for any random color as your painting process moves along. Remember that color plays a huge part when it comes to making a painting look harmonious and cohesive. So you always want to start with a plan and keep using those same colors throughout your entire painting process. And finally, step number 5 for me would be to select the paintbrushes that I'm going to be using for my painting. And I also check my canvas or my canvas board to see if it requires any more layers of gesso. Usually I like working with as few paintbrushes as possible. Whenever I'm working with oils, I enjoy using flat brushes for the most part. And I just make sure to have a few paintbrushes that I can use with dark colors and a few paintbrushes that I can use with light colors. And whenever I'm working with watercolors, most of my illustrations can be completed using only a couple of different rounds and maybe one larger flat. 2 things that I always have in mind when I'm choosing the sizes of my paintbrushes are the actual size of my painting and what style of painting I'm going for. If I am creating a painting that is large and is meant to be more loose and expressive, I go for larger brushes. And if I'm going to do something smaller and tighter and more detailed, I go for smaller brushes. And in terms of the gesso, I usually like buying prepped, stretched canvas that has already been gessoed. But most of the time, this is a very thin layer of gesso. So when I am doing acrylic painting, like my abstract acrylic paintings, I don't really need to do another layer of gesso, I feel. But when I am painting with oils, I almost always add in another layer of gesso. And that is it in terms of how I prepare for a painting. Usually by this point, I'm ready to move on to my canvas staining process. I hope you found this helpful, and I'm going to leave you now with the rest of this time lapse. Thank you so much for watching this video and being here with me today. I really appreciate it. Follow me on social media so you can see what I'm up to on a daily basis. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I hope to see you around next Friday. Bye!